would you happen to know how I can get to Hitchcon by any chance? Guys? Where's he going? Excuse me? Excuse me? No! Sir? This guy thinks he's Alfred Hitchcock or something. Alright. You don't want to talk? Fine. Is that the Hitchcon? Get these kids out of here! Just don't move. I'm leaving. I'm leaving. No! No. Oh man, woo! Wow. Did anyone else have a hard time getting here? Or is it just me? But hey, what a trip, and I've made it to Hitchcon, baby! Yeah! Oh man, I went all the way to Cape Cod for nothing, but that's all right. I'm back now, and I'm ready to present my presentation on Under Capricorn and how this film shows a real complex look at love and relationships as opposed to the more romanticized version of love that we are more accustomed to. And just before I begin, I just want to thank Joel Guns and Mark Strauss for having me. I feel really honored to be a part of this panel of many Hitchaholics and Hitchcockian fanatics and historians and scholars who have written some fantastic books. So thank you so much, and I hope that you're all enjoying the conference. This is a really extraordinary film, and having now watched it 3 times in very close proximity as well. It reminds me of what Martin Scorsese said about Vertigo. You haven't seen Vertigo until you've seen it more than once, at least twice. And I feel that way about this because the relationships are so complex and full of history. Looking at Hattie and Flusky, Hattie was played by Ingrid Bergman and Flusky was played by Joseph Cotten. And we see this history here. What we don't see is what we often see in Hollywood films, which is the romanticized view of love, which is true. And often when we began to fall in love with the people that we're with, we think of the best of times in the beginning, the dinners out, the going to movies, the partying, the first kiss, and you don't see any of that in this movie, but it is discussed. Flusky was Hattie's stable boy. She's from a very rich family in Ireland, and he worked for the family. He was a stable boy. When Ingrid Bergman as Hattie talks about with such fondness and beauty and love about how he taught her how to ride. And you can really see particularly as she talks about it, you can see the images of all that. And that foundation is so strong with them. And then what ended up happening was this jealous brother was about to kill one of them or both of them when he found out they got married. You don't exactly know what his problem is or why he was such a crazed brother, but she shot him. And what happened is that Joe Cotten took the blame and went to jail. So what do we see right there? Sacrifice. And sacrifice is a part of love. Now, does everybody go to jail for their spouses? I mean, it's not an everyday occurrence, but certainly people sacrifice things in their life for their partners. They make changes for their partners to better each other's lives. And we certainly see that with Flusky. But what we see later on is that he was in prison for 7 years, and this guilt ate away at her. And it destroyed her. And she followed him basically to Sydney, where he was staying in prison, and in Australia. And you don't really know exactly how she got by, but it seemed like she went through hell in order to just survive, and talked to him through the steel bars. And how many of us, this is another part of life when things go wrong, when we do something that affects our partner, and there may be resentment, there may be guilt about a choice you made that affected your partner. That could be just quitting a job, or having less children than your other partner wanted. And there can be guilt is really a part of love. It's those things that, do we move through them? Do we work through them, or do we let them let them destroy our relationship? And sometimes they do, and in this case, it didn't, because he comes out of jail and they're together. And now, but the relationship is not the same. And again, this is the first time we see this relationship. She's this woman who's an alcoholic, and everyone around town really doesn't want anything to do with her. No one can help her, and they barely speak. I mean, he's taking care of her, but she doesn't really get up till noon, and she's just been destroyed from alcoholism and guilt. That's very common with relationships. There can be distance, there can be separation, there can be times when things are no longer the same anymore, and people have children, and other things become more important than maybe their own interactions, and being able to have that independence and go out. Again, I'm just using these things as examples for people to relate to. Even though this is a Gothic melodrama, it's still very much rooted in truth, I find. Early on, Joseph Cotten, he invites all these people over because he's hoping that his wife will be able to come down and mingle with all, and everyone. No one brings their wife, you see. And when we see Ingrid Bergman come down the stairs, we only see her feet first. And this whole time, this woman that people have been talking about, and Joseph Cotten, at this point, everyone thinks he was the murderer, of course. And this woman that no one knows what she looks like, the first thing you see is her feet, and then putting her hands on Joseph Cotten's shoulders. And I, for some reason, thought maybe he was going to get mad that she came down, or he was going to get embarrassed, but he wasn't at all. He puts his hand on her hand with such tenderness, and there's a sorrow there. There's a sadness that the relationship is not what it was. There's a confusion. There's an element of just not knowing what to do. And how many of us have hit a crossroads in a relationship where you either end it or you go on? And he's trying to help. And that's, of course, where Mr. Adair comes in. Now, what we see with Mr. Adair is interesting, because this is 1830. It's a very, very new country. It's only been around for 60 years. The British have colonized it, and so they have an Irish governor, and the cousin comes to make his fortune. That's all he wants. But what's interesting is that he's also at that dinner party. He's invited by Joseph Cotten once he finds out that Mr. Adair is Irish. He feels like, because his wife is Irish, that perhaps that would be of use for her to see someone from home, to bring her back to who she was. As soon as he meets Ingrid Bergman, he agrees. He wants to help her. So at first you feel, is he finding her attractive? Does he like her? And of course, it's clear that he does. And what's interesting, again, we see a new love story developing, but it's not romanticized, because he's falling in love with this woman when she's, first time he sees her, she's very drunk. She's, depressed and guilt-ridden and very upset. And it's not what we usually see in movies, or through the male gaze of the beautiful, drop-dead, gorgeous woman that, the guy falls in love with, that we've seen even to this day. They still use those love at first sight shots. How often do we fall for people in those states? I mean, again, we usually fall for people when we see them at their best, when they're presenting their best, and vice versa. And of course, as we get to know them better, we either love their flaws, love their contradictions, and vice versa, or we don't. And that's often, people split for once they really get to know each other more and more. Things don't work out, or not only that, people want different things. So what's interesting to me is that he falls for her when she's at her lowest. And I thought that was really beautiful. I mean, Mr. Adair is such a wonderful person. He has his share of flaws, and he has this naive view that he can just go there and make a fortune. So I just thought, he doesn't know what he's going to do, but he wants a fortune. So he's naive, but yet he's he's very amazing at getting her back on her feet and telling her what she's capable of. And I love that moment when she says she hasn't even looked at herself in the mirror in years, and with his coat he puts it on the window so she can look through the window and reflect back on herself. And he really rebuilds her confidence. And when he kisses her and she says this is not right, and you is she talking about the kiss, or is she just talking about the fact that she can't go on because she with trying to take over the house like he wants her to. And Flusky is become very, very rich, and so they have servants and they have a household and that sort of thing. So it's interesting because you can't help but ask yourself how she felt about that kiss. I don't think that she was really falling for him, even though it seems as if they are. They're laughing together. They're having a good time together. He's flirting with her. I don't think he even meant to be flirting with her. I mean, how often when we fall in love, do we mean to fall in love, or does it just happen? Hence the term falling in love. He falls for her and he kisses her in that moment, and he doesn't seem to feel guilty or bad that this is basically she's cheating on her husband in that minute, because right away it's not discussed, and he doesn't tell Flusky either. He doesn't seem to have any kind of guilt, and later on you get the feeling that he wants to take her from Flusky as things begin to get worse, because what ends up happening is, and this is really a parts of relationships, is Flusky becomes insecure. He becomes jealous of what he sees. And there's also the class division. He was a stable boy and she has always been rich. He's rich now, but he doesn't relate to anyone who's rich. He doesn't necessarily feel like he's rich because they look at him as this ex-criminal and no one wants anything to do with him. But when she goes out later to this dance, this ball thrown by the governor, Mr. Adair gets her into. He shows up, Flusky, and he really accuses her of doing horrible things, and later on calls her trash and accuses her of basically wanting to leave him for Adair, and this is not true at all. So it's the insecurities that come up, and again, it just relates to how often we're in a relationship and perhaps we see someone flirting with our partner, and often people can get very jealous, very insecure, and that's a lot of stuff that's because of their past, and it boils up to that moment, and it can, for a lot of people, it can really create a problem, insecurities and jealousy. So that's really a part of love and relationships. And I also really want to mention the character of Millie, who's like the housekeeper. And as far as this movie doesn't seem like a Hitchcock movie at all, but it has certain elements, certainly the crime element, the crime of the past. And of course, just like in Rebecca, the evil housekeeper, because Millie really is evil, and she actually is the one who's in love with Flusky, and she in the whole film is trying to kill Ingrid Bergman. She's been the one giving her drinks and drinks and drinks. I mean, I don't think you can't necessarily blame Millie for the alcoholism of Ingrid Bergman the entire time, but she certainly was giving her more and more as she was already drunk, and that's evil. It's this. How many of us have evil in us when we meet someone and they already have a boyfriend or girlfriend, and we may not do anything, but part of us wants us to destroy it. Part of us wants to drive a wedge in between them, wants them to break up, and of course, again, this is heightened because Millie later on actually tries to poison her. Flusky accidentally shoots Mr. Adair. Now again, because he accidentally shot him, Ingrid Bergman then admits that she killed her brother and not him, because on a second offense, Flusky was going to get hanged because it would be a second crime. And that was the law there at the time. she has to go back to Ireland for a trial, and then he says he's gonna at first he says he's gonna sell everything and go back with her. Again, this guy is full of sacrifice. He'll do anything for this woman. At first, he says he wasn't going to because he still thinks that it's a plan for her to go back to Ireland with Mr. Adair. And again, the insecurities, he starts to maybe regret what he's done for her all these years. And, let's be honest, we have those moments where if the relationship's suddenly not working out, I did this for you, I did this for you, what a waste. And we see that in this film. We see that with Flusky. And as he comes to grips, he realizes that's not the case, and that his wife is not lying to him, and that, but this is really when Millie realizes that she's going to have to kill Ingrid Bergman. And of course they catch her, trying to put some sleeping, they didn't have sleeping pills back then, but a fatal dose of sleeping medicine in her alcohol in order for it to be fatal. So, again, I don't think any of us, well, I mean, surely it happens at times where people are so jealous that they murder, unfortunately, but we may not act on those impulses. But again, as I said, we can have those same thoughts in our heads, like, I hope they break up, or maybe I can do something to break them up. And here this is a melodrama, so it's heightened and it's murderous, and it's evil. There is also a touch of Flusky having an affection for Millie because they're both servants and they both have common ground. They have that in common. There's a moment in the film when he mentions that they both come from the same place, and it's very, very brief, and it made me think of people who perhaps have been with people or are with people who come from a totally different upbringing than you, and perhaps when those very different, whether it's cultural or whatever it may be that's different, when there's friction in those instances of maybe not recognizing something because they've had a different point of view that you're not used to, perhaps thinking of someone that perhaps even attracted to, that has that same upbringing as you, and you start to think, maybe I would have been better off with that person. These are the things that people find hard to admit in life. Mr. Adair has to make a choice. This argument that happened where he was accidentally shot with the pistol, and it was accidental. He really realizes that Ingrid Bergman, as Hattie, does not love him, that she is inseparable, that they are together, Flusky and Hattie. There's this interesting, in the early part of the film, in the dinner scene with the candles, he frames them both in the middle of these candles, and the candles are together, and you can't separate the candles. And I was trying to figure out what that image meant, and that's what I really think it was, that these people are made for each other, that you cannot break them apart. And he has that choice, I mean, is he just going to be prideful and arrogant and try to ruin their relationship by sending Flusky to jail, or saying that, yes, Flusky was trying to kill me, he's an animal, or is he going to, if he really loves her, he'll do what she wants, what she needs, and to let her go. This is a moment of consciousness, and I didn't find it corny at all. I actually thought the fact that he says it was an accident and they had to let Flusky go, and he says goodbye to her, and it's sad, right? It's sad. It's a bittersweet ending because she has restored her confidence. She's back with her husband, and it's optimistic. But what about Mr. Adair? He went there for his fortune. He didn't get it, and he fell in love with a woman who he couldn't get. But he goes back so gracefully, and he just heads right back home. It's a really wonderful performance from Michael Wilding. I haven't seen him in anything else. And Margaret Leighton as Millie was also wonderful. Joseph Cotten and Bergman were fantastic as well. So if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend it. And I think it will help you to reevaluate perhaps your own view of love, and perhaps your own relationships, and some clarity as to things that we all go through in our relationships and love, and that it's all normal. As much as you love someone, nothing is perfect. And I think this film, in this heightened Gothic melodrama, really shows that. So Thank you so much, folks. I hope that you've enjoyed this, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you so much.